and privileged to introduce him. His name is Dan McIver. Some of you probably know him quite well. Some of you, this might be first time meeting him. Dan has been working with Navigators for just around 28 years. So he's a veteran in the field of student ministry, of campus ministry. He's stationed in Kingston, working at Queens, but he's kind of been there. He's been in a number of different positions with Navigators and leadership, but he's back at Queens now. He's also making inroads into St. Lawrence College in Kingston as well. And I had a chance to have a chat with him over the week, and it was just really encouraging to hear his heart for students and for ministry and outreach on campus. So as I said, I'm excited to hear from him today. He's going to be sharing from the heart, giving some updates, and also giving his perspective, his experience on ministry and outreach to the next generation. So why don't you join me in welcoming Dan as he comes up. Great to hear from you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been great to, just really been blessed and encouraged even in the preparation for this time, helping me to think through things that I've been doing for a lot of years, as you mentioned, quite a few years. My wife turned to me and said, "You're old," when you said that. So, no, it's encouraging to be here. This church has been very supportive and encouraging to myself personally and the ministry. Martin, Ali are good friends. And it's been a great journey in ministry over the years. I've had interns that have worked with us and have been supported by the church here as well financially, and they've gone on. There's one in Angola who's a missionary in Angola, another in Ecuador who's been supported as an intern through the Pure Church. So this ongoing partnership with discipling the next generation has been for years. And so I'm excited to update you guys and give you guys a sense of how I think about discipleship for the next generation, a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. So I thought before I go too far, I should define discipleship and how I think about it, how I see it. So here's a few thoughts on discipleship. First of all, disciple is a follower or a student. In Christianity, it is a follower of Christ. We think of Jesus and his disciples in this. Discipleship occurs when followers of Christ help each other in their life and faith in Jesus. To disciple someone means to take initiative to connect with a person, to share your life and your faith with them, to engage in scriptures together, and to do mission or service together. To love them, to receive love from them in a two-way learning relationship. I like to think of holistic discipleship, thinking about the whole person. And a helpful analogy I've heard over the years and I've used, and it's been very fruitful in discipling, is this idea of head, heart, and hands. So, often we can think of the head, right? So it's, reading the Bible, maybe it's your right thinking in terms of your theology, how you think about people, more a heady, experience of the faith. But then there's the heart as well, and how do you grow and develop on a heart level, and that's different than the head level. And so I think about love, compassion, the depth of your relationships with other people. Paul was such an intellectual giant and has written a lot of the scriptures, and yet he was very strong on his value for the heart as well. You think of 1 Corinthians 13, 1 and 2, verses that are said at many, many weddings. It goes like this. If I speak in tongues of human beings and of angels, but I don't have love, I'm a clanging gong or a clashing cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and I know all the mysteries and everything else, and if I have such complete faith that I can move mountains, but I don't have love, I am nothing. And then I think about the hands. The hands, actions, helping, doing. James 2:20 says, faith without deeds is useless. So as you think about that for yourself, if you're seeking to disciple somebody, you can kind of, understand yourself and think, now, am I strong, in the head aspect? Maybe I have to work a little harder on the heart aspect or the hands aspect. And then also the person you're discipling, where is their strengths and weaknesses? So another little way in which when I'm discipling somebody, it helps me think through well what to do and what to emphasize is I think for myself, okay, what is my strength area? What is my stretch area? And what is my struggle? Strength, stretch, and struggle. In the university context that I work in, a lot of it is head knowledge. The university itself is a very head-focused, intellectual, IQ-focused environment. And so when people are exploring their faith and seeking to grow in their faith, there's very much this intellectual, and rightfully so, focus. But then maybe the areas of heart and hands are the areas where you need to stretch, either yourself personally or the person you're discipling. And so just an example of how this has shown up in my ministry. I had students coming to our home with my wife, and I would have students in our home on a Sunday night. And, they would come and we would have a video series. We were doing a video series called 12 Neighbors, helping students learn to love their neighbor and to understand poverty. And so we're looking at these videos, and then we're also looking at the scriptures, the parable of the Good Samaritans, and we're talking about these things. And then after a while, I'm starting to get that feeling like, okay, like we need to do something. Like we can't just sit here and enjoy my wife's fabulous chocolate chip cookies and cup of tea and talk about these things. And the things that are said are just amazing. Like you're thinking, wow, these students were really thinking about this well, and yet we don't do anything. And so I've started going to a church in Kingston that's in a poor neighborhood. And so I would invite the students to come with me and knock on some doors in the neighborhood and invite the people from the neighborhood into the church for like a soup lunch. And just trying to move the group from this kind of intellectual, passive talking to doing. And you grow in ways you would never grow. You can talk till you're blue in the face. You can study until you're blue in the face. But until you engage on a heart level with people, you won't grow. And so that's an area, that's how that sort of looks in my ministry. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an intro to how I think and feel about discipleship. As was said, I've been involved with the Navigators for many years. So just to give you a little bit of understanding of the Navigators, some of you would be familiar with the Navigators, some not. The Navigators are known for their discipleship. And Dawson Trotman was the founder of the Navigators. And the way it unfolded for him is he was kind of a tough guy and rode a motorcycle and came to faith. And so what he would do is he would be riding his motorcycle and he would pick up hitchhikers. And so once you were on the back of his motorcycle, there was no escape. You got the gospel. Like you were there. There's nowhere else you could go. And so he shared the gospel with people, and a lot of people were coming to faith that way, and he was a very compelling and articulate person to share the gospel. And then so one day he picked up a guy and he got in the back and he told him, shared the gospel, and the guy was really keen to, it's like, oh yeah, this is for me. I want to accept Christ. And they stopped the motorcycle and they got off and they prayed. And then after the prayer, they kind of looked at each other in the eyes and he said, I hope it works this time. And Dawson's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, we did this last year and it didn't work. So that's where Dawson got his conviction about the fact that people need to be followed up, that they need to be helped along the way in their journey. They need to be discipled. They need to become established in their faith. So then he started working with people in the Navy, and that's where the name Navigators came from. It's not like a website search engine or anything. And at Pearl Harbor, actually, when the ships, the bombing of Pearl Harbor happened, a lot of the ships would have had navigator Bible studies on those ships, people involved in navigators. And then when Billy Graham was doing his evangelistic events, he'd had all these people coming to faith, and he's like, man, we got to help these people grow in their faith. Who knows how to do that? Of course, he immediately thought of Dawson Trotman and the Navigators. And the Navigators, over the years, and even up to today, have been famous for very well known for their discipleship materials, diagrams, books on how to grow in your faith. And so that was a big role of the Navigators in those days, was to help with the evangelistic events when people came to faith. So my involvement with the Navigators, I went to the University of Waterloo. I was a student there, and when I first got there, I'd come from a Christian home and environment, and I was looking for a group to help me in my faith. And so I got involved with the Navigators, and sure enough, it was a great place for me as a Christian to land and to find other people to support me in my beliefs. But then partway through the year, there was this opportunity to go on a missions trip, which was to the island of St. Vincent in the Caribbean. So for a guy who's never been further south than Detroit, it was a pretty appealing option, so I jumped at that chance. And trying to check my motives as I went, semi-successfully. And so I went on this missions trip, and that really caught my attention as a young man, this exciting mission opportunity. And to see that the Navigators were, they were reaching out to students, but then through students, they were also reaching out to the world. And but the thing that really caught my attention and really helped me, as exciting as that was and impactful as that was, it was actually the Navigator staff, Jeremy, who was there taking a personal interest in me and inviting me into his life. We would be into the scriptures together, but he also invited me to his home. He invited me over for dinner, and after a while, I just started inviting myself over for dinner, and we would hang out, and just this discipling relationship was beautiful, and that's how I grew. And I just realized, hey, this guy's taking an interest in me. He sees something in me. He wants to help me, and that's when I really took off in my faith. So much so that I said that this is what I want to do. Like, I want to help other people in the same way that I've been helped. And so upon graduating, I got married right after I graduated, came on staff, moved to Queens, started working with my wife, Sue, at Queens University, who's already on staff with the Navigators. Another motive check there a little bit, but that was an exciting part of the package as well. And my wife's here with us. Yeah, so it's not so much this idea of a formula, like if you get these things straight, you can be a great discipler, or, it is very much a heart motivation to connect and invest in people, and it's about sharing life together. It's not a formula. So over the past 28 years, I've done a lot of different roles with the Navigators, and as well as being the missions director the last few years, and before I moved into the focus here more in Kingston. And just this idea of focusing on students, the next generation, often taking students into mission opportunities like I experienced as a student. So we have one of our staff is in Ecuador, Carlos. He's the young man that was supported by the Pure Church as an intern here. And now he is actually, and he went to Ecuador as a student and then decided, God just put on his heart the people there. And so now he's the person that helps us when we go there, and he's the missionary in the location, which is amazing. And I just thought being here, talking to you folks, and just remembering those days as him as an intern, it's just such a neat part that the Pure played. He came here actually and spoke at your other location, and that was a really cool thing. So this past year, I've been focusing more so than in previous years when I was the missions director on students in Kingston. And I'm just going to share a couple thoughts from this past year as well. So, like I said, we had students coming on Sunday nights, both from St. Lawrence and Queens, to our house, and had a little group, kind of building things up again here locally. And also looking for ways to connect with students, in other ways. So I'm one of the chaplains of the Queens hockey team, and also managed to become an assistant coach with the St. Lawrence College badminton team, which is new this year, to re-engage that again. So those are kind of neat little ways to be in life with people and around folks, especially to because I'm supported by churches like the Pier, I can actually go to St. Lawrence College and be a badminton coach and be at the Queen's varsity hockey games and really go to people and be around them. Hockey players have a bit of a reputation. And hockey culture has been in the news for all their own reasons over the last few years. And as a hockey chaplain for probably the past 10 or so years, I've caught glimpses of some of that toxic hockey culture. But I've also seen individuals, hockey players, with a real hunger for God and just like everybody else in all ways. And so there was one student, say Kevin, and I had to really step up as the chaplain of the hockey team when his father passed away tragically due to an accident. And when I was talking with Kevin, one of the very first conversations we had was talking about grief and what does it mean to grieve. Not your typical get to know you starter question, but that's just where he was at. And we talked about life. We kind of processed things that were happening. And then I invited him to study the scriptures with me. I have a little study that I started helped create with a bunch of students when I was back in university. It's called Encounters with Jesus. Very simple, 5 different encounters Jesus has with people in the Bible. There's a little excerpt, a little bit of context, a little bit of the scripture, and then questions. And really with the first-time Bible reader in mind, no prep. You just have to be open to learning who Jesus is and seeing how he interacted with different people. So I started doing that with him, and then pretty soon other hockey players joined, and then over the year, different hockey players were going in the scriptures with me and really curious and just really neat to see people engaging the scriptures, many who've never before, and just to learn from them and to hear their perspective and get just fresh for my own walk with God, as well as sharing what I've passing on some things to them from my faith. And then again, following some of those principles I was talking about earlier, like wanting to engage the hockey team, give them a sense of mission and purpose outside themselves, help them to reach out to others. So I have a friend who's an immigrant services worker in Kingston. And so when refugees come to the city, he's involved with them, and I'm aware of what's going on. And so I had the Queen's University hockey team come to the church and in the church parking lot teach these refugee kids hockey, which is really cool. And just really neat to see the guys too, just to see a warm and caring side of them when they're reaching out to these kids. So that was a really cool initiative. And then they also gave free tickets to the refugee kids and their families. And so, not your typical hockey crowd, it's like people from all over the world, in the stands there. It's a pretty cool thing to witness. So just pulling out a couple of those principles about discipleship that I'm mentioning, and just even how they've been working through my own ministry this past year. Genuinely, with the hockey team, genuinely connecting with the guys. We have a chapel service every other week, basically right in the coach's office, right next door to the change room. The idea of just going to where they're at, they finish practice, they come, we do a little bit of scripture, or we have a focus, a topic on character or something like that. But then also just going to the hockey games, being able to be a part of their world in that sense, especially the home games. And then taking them out individually for a coffee or for meals and things like that. Doing that in those encounters with Jesus was just really encouraging, really neat to do with the hockey players this year. And then that engaging in mission with the refugee kids. So there's a new partnership that I'm really excited about and excited to tell you guys about and appreciate your prayers for. It's a partnership with International Student Ministries. If you could put that up on the screen here now. Good. Basically, I got to meet the National Director for International Student Ministries. Yeah, it's a cool picture of all the students waving there. This is what's happening in Hamilton. And after I learned about what's happening in Hamilton, I was thinking this could really work in Kingston. And so you see they've got 3 categories there: practical supports, social supports, and spiritual supports. So it's kind of a one-stop shopping opportunity for people coming to the city from around the world as international students to receive support. And if you could just click on the practical supports, it just got a little drop down that menu of practical. That's good there, that's fine. So just little programs that they've developed to help international students. Everything like really practical housing, right? Like in the housing crisis, how landlords who are willing to rent to international students, things like that. And then social supports. If you can just click on that. There you go. So you think about fun, family, and festivals. So inviting international students for dinner. Maybe it's Easter dinner and sharing each other's cultural or religious backgrounds, and or like taking international students on a hike, things like that. So just doing different things where you can rally the Christian community to support international students, put it all on one page, and call it something like Hamilton International Students or Kingston International Students. Actually, if you could just click on spiritual supports, spiritual cares. So they actually even have like pastors who are willing to be on the website as a spiritual support for international students. And that's a really, really awesome connection. These are just different ways that we can help people who are coming to this country, but also liaison with the colleges and the university. They've really won over in Hamilton McMaster and Mohawk College, and they really value what the Christians in the community are bringing in the churches in terms of support and looking to complement what they're doing, because there are thousands of international students coming to Canada. They're being welcomed by the federal government into Canada, and then there's this kind of scramble of how to help them. And even the colleges are recruiting and universities are recruiting aggressively. And so if we can step into that gap and help support the students and serve the colleges and universities at the same time, then there's a real opportunity for sharing our life and faith with people from around the world. And then as we get to know them and support them, then they can come to our churches and be a part of what we're doing, and we can share more openly our faith as they get to know us better. Great, if you can, perfect. Bless you. It's a good pause. I'll take a sip. Okay, so Jason reminded me, was asking me to talk about discipling the younger generation. And as he said that, I was reminded of this one question that is kind of, it's been, I'll pause on what I'm going to say about the question first, and maybe we should look at the scriptures first. That actually would be a good idea. So the question is, are students today still open to the gospel? So if you think about that, have that in your mind. Are students today still open to the gospel? And we'll put up the scripture now. In Psalm 100, it's only 5 verses. There we go. Okay, so I'll read it out, and think of that question in your mind as you read this. Psalm 100. Shout triumphantly to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with celebration. Come before him with shouts of joy. Know that the Lord is God. He made us. We belong to him. We are his people, the sheep of his own pasture. Enter his gates with thanks. Enter his courtyards with praise. Thank him, bless his name. Because the Lord is good. His loyal love lasts forever. His faithfulness lasts generation after generation. A couple things that jump out to me as I read that. Know that he is the Lord. The idea of keeping grounded in who God is. We are his people. Finding our identity in Christ, remaining in Christ. The Lord is good. God's very nature and being is love and goodness. And right at the end, and this is a real thing we can camp on here and trust in, his faithfulness lasts generation after generation. So are students still open to the gospel these days? I've struggled with this question. I think maybe it's a little bit on me. I think it's maybe a little bit of pressure I feel, like I've done all this work with university students for all these years, and I should have some kind of really fantastic insight for everybody that, everybody can learn from, and I feel a little bit of pressure that I have to deliver on that. But I also think there's something about the question that maybe it's even more where the question sometimes comes from. I've heard people ask that question, and it seems at times to me that it's coming from a place of discouragement, maybe of confusion, doubt about what's going on in the world, youth culture, our culture in general. And it seems like it's doubting the next generation, but I wonder if in some ways maybe it's more a doubting God, doubting that God is faithful through the generations, as this Psalm 100 says. So I don't know what you think about that, and it'd be interesting to talk to different ones about that, but that's something over the years I've experienced and wrestled with, and yet these verses give me hope, and they really encourage my heart in this. So my answer to the question is that God says he'll be faithful, that he is faithful through the generations, to this next generation. And I actually need to be listening to this next generation to understand how God is doing that, and learn from this next generation in ways maybe that I haven't before had opportunity to. Now, I did an informal survey. I was doing a leadership development course, and I created a survey basically ranking my listening skills from 1 to 10, and I gave it to direct reports, family, interns, and I didn't score so well. Especially the younger person that was doing the survey, the worse I scored. So that was a really eye-opening exercise for me, and a little bit of a wake-up call. But then as I listen to and observe the next generation, I do have hope. And I'll give you a couple examples. In my own life, my son works with the navigators at the University of Calgary, and my daughter-in-law as well. So I was invited to a national campus gathering for students this past year, and my son and daughter-in-law were in charge of welcome. There was about 60 students from around the country, 20 staff, and they were in charge of welcoming everybody. They did workshops, and I brought a few students, but it was just a joy to be there and to see how they welcomed everybody and how they interacted and how they led, and it gave me a lot of hope for not only my son, but also the way they were interacting with this next generation and ministering and blessing them. The other example is one of the students I've discipled over the years, Curtis Carmichael. Very different person than me. He's a black guy from a poor neighborhood in Scarborough, and came as a football player to Queens, and was part of our program. And I got to know him, and I was discipling him. And then after he graduated, he made it to the CFL practice roster. Wasn't kind of on the bubble with that. Decided not to go that route. Instead, cycled across Canada to raise money and awareness about systemic racism in Canada, and then wrote a book about his life. And just learned so much, and many things I didn't even learn when he was on campus. It wasn't until after, and he had time to process and his ride across the country and write a book about it. And now he's doing a race across America, not this summer, but the following summer. And he asked me to be part of an 8-person team to ride across the country in this race across America, because he's doing it's a social enterprise nonprofit, and it was to help grades, K to 12 kids with the future of work and tech innovation. So he's doing some amazing things. He was in the Forbes 30 under 30 most influential entrepreneurs, and just an amazing guy. But just to see people that you've had a little hand in their life, as they've come through, and then they go on into a space where they're leading and they're making a difference, and then they invite you into it, and now you're learning from them and hearing what they're doing. So in conclusion, is the next generation open to the gospel? My hope and prayer is you join me in saying absolutely. And not only that through some of the things I've shared, that you're more encouraged, motivated, and knowledgeable on how to go about connecting with anyone in a discipling relationship. So I'm going to call Jason up now. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be with you.
Check. There we go. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I really appreciate all that you've shared there. I was thinking of a question as I was coming up. You said that you reflected on that question. Are the next generation open to the gospel? I'm just curious. Maybe what are one or two ways where you've seen an openness? Because sometimes the gospel hits us in different ways, and we talk about the gospel being good news, and we need to communicate it in a way where it's good news. So what are maybe that in your experience people are latching onto with the gospel as good news? They're hearing it, oh, that's amazing. Can I learn more? That sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm thinking about the hockey players. I don't know about you, I just had sort of an image in my mind of what hockey guys are like, and yet, just studying something like these studies, just their insights into Jesus and just their admiration of Jesus. You'd think maybe a bit of cynical kind of pushback or whatever, but just more as if you look directly at Jesus in the scriptures, there's not the same kind of cynicism or skepticisms that you find if you say, you're talking about Christians in general or something like that. So it's very, very open to a direct look at Jesus as opposed to talking about, hot topics or something.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And we're going to pray for you in just a moment as a congregation, but how specifically can we be praying for you in the weeks and months ahead?
Well, I mentioned this International Student Ministries Partnership. I mean, it's brand new. I'm just forming. There's about 4 or 5 people in Kingston who are forming a bit of a core team around that, and so I mean, it's kind of it's so early that we haven't even taken the first step. And I've got somebody actually. The first step is to get somebody with some tech ability on the website, which I do not have. So we've got someone in there who's in the engineering department at Queen's who's willing to take the lead on that. So everything that would be blossoming, that would develop and move forward and grow. That would be huge.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I'm really excited to hear more about that too. And I know we're kind of exploring helping out at St. Lawrence College, where there's a lot of international students as well. So I'm looking forward to learning from you.
That would be another one. Yeah, absolutely.